Welcome to the intersection of city politics and everyday life. I'm Brian Lehrer. Despite the numerous ways that our liberal, multi-ethnic sanctuary city is at odds with President Trump, many New Yorkers still figured its native son developer would nonetheless deliver the billions needed for the Gateway project, two new rail tunnels under the Hudson River that are vital to the region's economy and that New York, New Jersey, and the Obama administration had negotiated how to pay for. Well, dream on. Last week, Trump reportedly told congressional leaders not to fund the Gateway after all. So now we still have that infrastructure challenge before us, in addition to the usual dysfunctional suspects: Penn Station, the subways, public housing, rusting bridges, and rising sea levels. How, in these relatively high times, did we get to this low point? And isn't there a loftier vision for our city's future than simply doing better maintenance? Our three thoughtful guests think so, and we will meet them in a few minutes. But let's begin with some inspiration, a look at the original Pennsylvania Station, which was completed in 1910. Now, we demolished it in 1963 and built a new Madison Square Garden above the basement tracks. But to give us a sense of that lost gateway to our city, we reached writer Jill Jones. She is the author of many books about cities, including Conquering Gotham, Building Penn Station, and its tunnels. This first part of our Skype call to her runs about 2 minutes.
So the original Penn Station was designed by Charles McKim of McKim, Mead and White, which was one of the great architectural firms of all times in America. It was supposed to be an epic entry into New York, and it was the fourth largest building in the world when it opened. When you walked into Penn Station, you came in and there was this, it was called the waiting room, but actually it was so beautiful, and it had these very high windows through which sunlight or light would come down in this very godlike manner. This is Thomas Wolfe, the novelist Thomas Wolfe's description of being in the general waiting room, as it was called. There were people who saw everything and people who saw nothing, people who were weary, sullen, sour, and people who laughed, shouted, and were exultant with the thrill of the voyage, people who thrust and jostled, and people who stood quietly and watched and waited, people with amused, superior looks, and people who glared and bristled pugnaciously, young, old, rich, poor, Jews, Gentiles, Negroes, Italians, Greeks, Americans. They were all there, harmonized, and given a moment of intense and somber meaning as they were gathered into the murmurous, all-taking unity of time. So there was just this aspiration to make Penn Station embody so many aspects of, sort of human history and human emotion. And so it was a very profound place.
Pretty amazing, right? I'll bet you never saw the inside of the old Penn Station before. We also asked urbanist Jill Jones what forces led to the demolition of such a splendid structure as the original Pennsylvania Station after just 53 years of life.
When the station opened, railroads were the dominant form of long-distance travel. Automobiles became more and more common. The airline industry began, the bus industry. Those industries were all very heavily subsidized by the U.S. taxpayer. By the 1960s, railroads, which had been the main way that people got around, were really on hard times. They were not getting government subsidies. And there was a long legacy of tremendous resentment and dislike of the railroads at many levels in American society. And Penn Station just really looked terrible. So that kind of wondrous experience you had was gone. I mean, it was really filthy. The skylights were not clean. There's lots of broken sort of windows that were just covered up with wood or, cardboard. And I think it was only, as the station was coming down and people, and then of course, the very hideously ugly Madison Square Garden arose above it, that people began to realize, what they had lost.
Jill Jones, author of Conquering Gotham, Building Penn Station and Its Tunnels. Work is currently underway to transform the old Farley Post Office on 8th Avenue into Moynihan Train Hall, an extension of the current Penn Station. Part of it is already open, but Jones thinks it will be inadequate. From the Penn Station experience, the Gateway battle, and our failure to keep our subways and public housing in good condition, what have we learned about our values as well as our government? Here to discuss and dream about our city's futures are three distinguished guests. Vishant Chakrabarti is the founder of POW, the Practice for Architecture and Urbanism, subjects he teaches at Columbia University. He headed the Manhattan Office of City Planning in the Bloomberg administration, has proposed an alternative plan for Penn Station, and is author of A Country of Cities, a manifesto for an urban America. Afia Adamensa is here. She is Executive Director of Community Voices Heard, the nonprofit that guides grassroots organizations on such issues as equitable housing. While at the Urban Justice Center, she was Director of Litigation for a project that filed the federal lawsuit credited with pressuring the Bloomberg administration to abandon the idea of demolishing some public housing playgrounds and community centers so developers could build apartment towers. And last, but in no way least, Danny Simons, Vice President for Strategic Communication at the Regional Plan Association, the 90-year-old tri-state nonprofit that recently released its fourth Big Vision plan for the region. Welcome all of you. Thank you very much for coming. Prashant, does that Penn Station video speak to your philosophy about what could happen if the government, subsidizes cars and highways but not cities?
Well, it's such a tragic loss, and I think it talks about, you talked about values as well as our sort of politics, and I think that station and the tunnels that were built represented a time when we believed in the idea of the public. And I think one of the most pressing questions we have today in our city and our country is, do we believe in a sort of collective vision for who we are as a community? Our physical buildings, as an architect, I'm biased towards this view, but our physical buildings, our infrastructure, they're reflections of how much we actually care about ourselves as a society and whether we care about ourselves. And if you go to Penn Station today, I think the answer is pretty clear that we don't care too much. It's dangerous, it's awful, it's embarrassing, and it's only going to get worse.
Where does Penn Station fit in, Danny, to the Regional Plan Association's, RPA's, fourth regional plan that you put out? Big vision for the next decades of our city's future. You're trying to balance, I think, affordability with the desire to do a lot of big infrastructure.
Absolutely, and Penn Station is an important piece of that. Like Vishant said, right now it's dangerous, it's also crowded, it's really over capacity, like a lot of our infrastructure is. And expanding Penn Station, making it a better place, a better experience for people traveling through is an important part of the fourth plan. We also call for expanding it and building Penn South, and for creating a vision for Penn Station as a through-running station instead of just a terminus, because we think that it should really be part of the Gateway project and part of a gateway not just between New Jersey and New York, but really a connection to the greater part of the region. So allowing trains to continue on through Queens and Long Island and really opening up the regional economy in that way as well.
And Afia, with your work so focused on affordability and fighting inequality, when they talk about big vision for architecture and development, does that leave sort of most New Yorkers out, or is it relevant?
I think it's relevant. I think, sadly, the way it's been framed is that ideas of space and architecture are only left for upper income communities. Whereas clearly low-income communities, communities of color, working class communities throughout New York City care about things like space and park and free space. But clearly also care about being able to afford to live in the housing and the communities that they've made great over these years.
Is the Moynihan Station, which used to be talked about in grand terms, that beautiful post office across the street from Penn Station, transforming it so it becomes part of a beautiful new Penn Station, is it a diminished vision now?
Well, I think It was always a problematic vision in the sense, and I have enormous respect for our late great senator, but I think there was a misnomer that somehow all of Penn Station was going to move lock, stock, and barrel into the Farley Post Office, and that was never the case. It is an extension of the main station. It sits very far west of the main station and the tracks. I think one of the things that we should think about, and building on your point, is actually that you know, the Moynihan Station is mainly for Amtrak. That's great. We need a good Amtrak station, but those are the wealthiest people who use Penn Station, and it's also the smallest percentage of the various railroads that use Penn Station. So in other words, we're about to spend about $1.5 billion on a station that's primarily for largely wealthy patrons. And in the meanwhile, what is the busiest transportation hub in the Western Hemisphere, primarily made up of commuters, everyday working class people, will be stuck in the same basement underneath Madison Square Garden under the current plans. And I think a number of us think that's highly problematic.
So what's your alternative plan? Because I understand you have one.
Well, so the New York Times had approached us about saying, how could we do more? It's not that Moynihan is a bad project. It's, in my mind, it's a phase one towards doing more, which is to fix the main station, which is where the garden sits. I believe the garden could be given the right incentives to move. It's an old building. No matter how much money you pour into it, it's got a lot of kind of fixed infrastructure problems. If the garden moved, the question is, how do you afford to build a new station? And the idea we came up with was to actually recycle the garden's building, take off the ugly cladding, bring light in, expose the tracks up to light again, create much more safety, and in so doing, provide equity by creating a great station for everyone who uses the station, not just wealthy people who use the station, but also to transform that neighborhood, because today that's a neighborhood where people want to flee as soon as you get there, and it should be like our other great neighborhoods where you arrive with some dignity, some sense of safety, and can walk to your office building or your home or wherever you're going, you know, with some sense that you and your family actually belong here, that it's, you know, there's this greater sense of the public.
And Danny, what does the RPA think it would take, big project infrastructure-wise, to make New York more of a world-class city than it actually is? Because people who travel around the world come back and say, oh my God, Penn Station, compared to almost any other main commuter hub in the country, not to mention intercity rail station. Same thing, LaGuardia Airport. Joe Biden called it third world or whatever he said.
To which the third world, we actually have better airports.
Yeah.
That's right. That's true.
And so each of these things cost a lot of money, but what would it really take for New York not to be even sort of an embarrassment, which it is on some of these levels? Penn Station, LaGuardia, and what else?
You know, the Fourth Regional Plan has 61 recommendations for this region, some of which would get done hopefully over the next couple of years, some of which look out an entire generation. Part of what we're saying is that you have to start thinking bigger. And I think, as you said in some of your intro remarks, it's not just about fixing things or bringing things up to a state of good repair. It's really about modernizing, bringing things like our subways into the 21st century where they belong, looking to cities that what they've accomplished. If you look at London's subway system compared to ours, there's just no question that they've invested, they've used the most modern technology, they haven't let their system kind of fall behind. And they've expanded. And cities around the country and around the world are putting money into expanding their infrastructure. And that means expanding our subway to neighborhoods that are currently underserved. That means thinking creatively about how we even expand our bus network and our surface transit opportunities. Thinking about how we don't just say like, oh, can we make our regional rail a little bit better, but really expanding our regional rail also, because that opens up economic opportunities for people. It means building Gateway is a first step towards that, but it means going further and seeing how we can modernize and do more.
Right. So we've been talking about transportation infrastructure so far. Let's talk about housing infrastructure. Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor de Blasio have both been really aggressive at rezoning. I think it's fair to say, and you can weigh in on this later since you worked in planning for the Bloomberg administration, but Bloomberg, I think, was more concerned about sort of industrial development, rezoning for economic growth. De Blasio is more concerned about rezoning for affordable housing, even though there's pushback on how. How would you compare the two, and what do you think is important for affordability?
Sure. So I think this goes down to how we started this whole conversation about vision and values, right? And how are they valuing communities and the manner in which communities are engaged or encouraged to engage? And vision in that, listen, there's a framework for using affordability based on federal guidelines, which frankly doesn't work for New York, right? You have rezonings that happen in East New York and in East Harlem that focused on area median incomes that included counties that were outside of the city and frankly that were higher income. So it turned into issues of affordability for whom, right? And how does that affect the current folks who are living there and really made the community what it was? And I think, you know, to de Blasio's credit, he had this idea of wanting to deal with the affordability crisis. Our concerns are just how that affordability crisis is being dealt with. And frankly, the idea of trying to preserve units of affordable housing and totally ignoring the New York City Housing Authority, which is the last bastion of truly affordable housing in New York City. And it has to do, we think, with a lack of vision or values for low-income people, for that other New York City that's frankly being left in the cold.
The mayor and the governor have been going back and forth on NYCHA recently, with the governor saying they don't need more state funds, they need to manage their funds better, and this is a city responsibility. And the mayor saying we've been abandoned not just by Washington, but by Albany, and the state really needs to step up. In fact, I was just talking earlier today to the head of the Council of Presidents of Tenants Associations in NYCHA buildings, who wants the governor to declare a NYCHA state of emergency. Where are you on this?
You know, we think this is an area similar to transportation where the governor and the mayor should do something new, work together for the benefit of New Yorkers, right? Yes, there's definitely been some mismanagement and an erosion of trust for NYCHA residents on behalf of NYCHA that not just under this administration for decades has been systemically underfunded and has been forced to do more with less. Equally, the governor has to put some money into NYCHA, but similarly, the mayor has to really think about one, how they're going to put in money, how they move money from the preservation plan that originally excluded NYCHA. I think we found that to be a dubious argument earlier, but clearly given the nature of the crisis in public housing, to continue that stance doesn't make sense.
400,000 of our 8.5 million or so people live in NYCHA buildings.
City of almost the city of Boston. Are you going to leave the city of Boston in the cold? And it's a area where I think folks they have to work together. Yes, there's been mismanagement, and yes, there's a definite need for an infusion of money.
In fact, Vashan, sometimes sort of in my darkest moments about the city, I wonder if it's really governable at all with how many people live here compared to any other city in the United States. I'm sure you know these things. Our population is about 8.5 million now. The next largest city, which is LA, has right about 4 million, less than half as many people. And then city number 3, Chicago, has less than 3 million people. Of course, these are also very big metro areas, but a lot of the population lives technically in suburbs or in separately governed towns outside the city. Is New York City governable?
Of course New York City is governable. You know, look, I was born in Calcutta, a city that today is 14 million, has actually a quite beautiful subway system, has a lot of progressive values, has a beautiful airport. You know, I think this is a question of will. We are one of the wealthiest nations in the world. We are one of the wealthiest cities in the world. I think our budget was somewhere around 82 or 83 billion dollars. Right around 9/11, soon after which I was in the Bloomberg administration, I think our budget was almost half that. You know, I think part of the issue often with public policy is we're often fighting the last war. And so, you know, everyone, you know, was concerned about the Bloomberg administration gentrifying, but you also have to remember that after 9/11, we were worried about whether anyone would build a Quonset hut in New York City. And so, you know, this mayor came in with a very different set of priorities based on the times in which he was coming in. My prediction is the next set of real battles we're going to have to fight are going to be around rising sea levels and climate change, where you saw NYCHA housing in particular shamefully unprepared for what happened with a storm that wasn't even a hurricane. And so, you know, when I look at that, I see buildings that are maybe reaching the end of their useful life, and that's going to be a very big discussion with those residents and what to do in those properties. So I just, you know, of course it's governable, but we have to govern forward, not govern backwards.
Right. So let's look at some of these big tensions, like, for example, gentrification versus affordability. Danny, to the extent that gentrification is not just a dirty word, and I was speaking to Mayor Dinkins recently, who really wanted to reclaim it from being a dirty word to being neighborhood improvement in neighborhoods that used to be relatively, run down and unlivable in certain ways. So how do you see the essential tension, and how much do they need to pull against each other, or can they be integrated?
I mean, I think part of it is a question of good public policy, and RPA has a report out recently called Pushed Out that looks at how do you protect neighborhood residents against displacement, because we think that there needs to be more housing at all price points. I think it's a question of sequencing and a question of how do you kind of secure tenure for people who have been living there, who have made investments in that community, who've made that community a great place to live. How do you look at protecting them first and then invite in new development and invite in more? I think another piece of that is looking at this tension. One of my colleagues just a couple of days ago did a quick analysis on new data that's out from the city about the number of units that are currently vacant for seasonal, recreational, or other purposes. And he found that New York City is basically at a peak level right now of these pied-à-terre units. And these are units that are empty just, it could be an investor that's just holding it as an investment property. It could be someone who actually is using it as an occasional vacation home. It could be someone who's renting it out on one of the vacation rental services. But the number of units right now that are reserved for that are greater than the number of housing units in, I think, Prospect Heights, Park Slope, and Jackson Heights right now. It's a crazy number of units that are just sort of waiting empty. So how do you deal with those things? And those things, you could be creating more housing availability with simple changes to public policy without having to wait to build something new, or without the sort of impacts that building new necessarily brings.
Afia, gentrification versus affordability, inevitably in conflict forever?
It's a heavy tension, but as organizers, we say you can't build a bridge without tension. I mean, I think there's a real area of opportunity here. Right? Listen, New York City is still one of the best cities in the world. I'm a kid of immigrants, right? Ghanaians, which means I'm from the Bronx. So folks come here, they want to make their lives better. They come and make this community great. How are we thinking about them, as you were saying, going forward? We have people who need jobs. We have infrastructure that's crumbling. Where are the big, bold ideas that this administration has, both at the city and state level, right, to put this generation of New Yorkers to work building New York for the next generation of working folks, right? We have a real area of opportunity. There's going to be those tensions of gentrification and affordability. There has to be priorities for folks who are low income, who've lived in the communities, for seniors. They stabilize communities, but also a way to bring in folks who are, aging out of apartments. A lot of our members are members who continue to live in public housing. They're the children of folks, they going to college, but they can't afford to move out. Right? What does it look like to move out of the apartment you share with your family and try and get a studio for $2,000, right, while paying school loans?
Sean, does the old big idea paradigm conflict that we used to call Jane Jacobs versus Robert Moses still apply? If Jane Jacobs represents sort of neighborhood urbanism and Robert Moses represented big project infrastructure, but with a lot of costs to neighborhoods, if that's a fair shorthand, is that still the debate, or a debate?
I think it's a false dichotomy because, well, first of all, Jane Jacobs, as much as we all love her, really never addressed questions of large-scale infrastructure and how one is to build large-scale infrastructure. It was never her focus. And yet she fashioned herself as an economist of sorts and an urban economist and knew that economies were incredibly important for cities. With our Penn Station plan, we went to the community board. The community board voted unanimously in favor of it. So I think you can have big vision and bring people along if you're willing to have the right conversations and work with people. I also would just stress, back to the question you're also asking about affordability and gentrification. We do a lot of work in communities and cities in distress, and it is extraordinary what it means to have the wind at your back in a city like New York. You can do a lot with the power of the marketplace in a city. You can employ people, you can build infrastructure, you can do things that you need to do. You can do UPK, you can do that stuff because we are a wealthy city, and that's what we have to harness going forward, I think, is how do you take that and more equally spread the benefit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a big focus of our fourth regional plan, and one of our theses is that if you can continue to build this infrastructure and continue to accommodate more people with more housing, more affordable housing, more infrastructure capacity in your transit networks as well. You can invite more people in, and when you invite more people in, you build the tax base, and when you build the tax base, you can do all sorts of wonderful things, whether it's, extend your regional rail or provide, universal pre-kindergarten programs and what have you, but you need to have that continued growth to be able to have that revenue there. You need to do other things as well, but that's one of the underpinnings of it for sure.
Thea, you want to continue on that?
Yeah, I think it also goes to the idea of taking risks, right? Like pilot programs, I think what's difficult about New York City is it's hard to get things to scale, but we can have pilot programs of what does it look like to have housing for seniors, moderate income seniors that are larger one bedrooms that kind of free up units in Mitchell Lamas and NYCHA development so that all this more than 60,000 homeless families can move into, right? Like I think there is space and a willingness here amongst the general population, because we're suffering, to try new things. And it's about kind of the vision of the elected officials to take some of those risks, thinking 20 and 40 years down the line.
Where did your lawsuit against the Bloomberg administration regarding NYCHA fit into that? I think they saw it as wanting to take risks by building some market rate housing on some of the empty space on some of the grounds of some NYCHA developments to get more money into the NYCHA system.
So I think some of the issues that were raised there with tenants, and the reason why we brought the suit was also the manner in which, or the lack of engagement that was done. It was purported that those were empty spaces or underused spaces, but they were community gardens. And part of that is so we're not allowed to grow gardens in Harlem. We can't have gardens in Bushwick. And the idea that these would be luxury towers, many of them overshadowing the buildings, the public housing buildings, that was made clear that residents couldn't be a part of. Folks also want access to move up. So, part of that lawsuit was really about, while we understood the risk, giving a healthy challenge and building some tension around the previous administration of what would it look like as opposed to having only market rate towers, to have mixed income towers, to allow folks who are looking literally out the window of Carver houses at this new tower that they can't acquire.
Vashon, do you have favorite other cities that you think are models of the kind of urbanism that you aspire to for New York?
I think there are great examples to learn from other cities. I mean, we talked about London, and London is doing incredible things with investment in rail. And I have a pet theory that that's in part because it's the national capital. And of course, because of the famous deal with Hamilton and Jefferson, our national capital is not here.
Plus, I think America rebels against the idea of a national capital, whether it's the official capital like Washington or sort of the cultural and commerce capital of New York, in a different way than France reveres Paris, London is revered by England, right?
Absolutely. So we're actually the anomaly. I mean, if you go to most countries around the world, the capital is also where you see the most economic growth and you see a lot of these policies play out. I think it's important because the representatives of government who work in those places see that as a priority of that capital city being a strong and powerful thing.
Which unfortunately brings us full circle to probably why Trump decided not to go ahead with the Gateway project, because his base is in rural America. Thank you all very much for joining us at this table with some particular critiques and big ideas. Thank you very much. And that's our program for today. We're here each week, midweek at this hour, at the intersection of city politics and everyday life. And tune into my radio program weekdays 10 until noon on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, a debate on President Trump's tariffs plan. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.